Why?
You know what? Because you're an illegal and you know what? You don't live in Flower Mound and you're door dashing. You know what? Why are you entitled to be here with an illegal car? Go ahead.
I don't know.
You know what? I'll do that.
Just is homophobic?
No, speak English.
Yeah.
Well, then speak it.
But why?
But why? You know what? You're in Flower Mound. You know what? Go speak your language back in Mexico. You know what? Exactly. Hey, you're taking away jobs. You think it's funny? Okay. I can get in your face too.
Thank you.
Let me see your driver's license.
Your police?
Huh?
Your police?
You know what?
The woman behind the wheel did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She asked one word. Why? That was all. One word, spoken with an accent, spoken without apology, and then silence because Rosa Delgado did not have anything else to say to Cheryl Benton. Not yet. Rosa was 28 years old, born in Laredo, Texas, to parents who had been naturalized American citizens before she turned 2. She had grown up in a working-class household where nothing was handed to anyone and everything had to be earned twice, once by doing it and once by proving you had the right to do it. She was currently a law student at UT Austin on a partial scholarship, and the DoorDash sticker on her dash was not decoration. It was how she paid rent. It was how she bought groceries. It was how she covered the gap between what her scholarship provided and what her education actually cost. On this particular Saturday, she was between pickups, parked and waiting on a confirmation, when Cheryl Benton decided she was a problem. Rosa had an accent. She had always had one. She had never once considered it something to be ashamed of. What most people looking at Rosa that afternoon would not have seen, what Cheryl Benton certainly did not see, was the folder sitting in the glove compartment of that Honda Civic, Texas driver's license, United States passport, naturalization certificate, and at the bottom of the stack, a handwritten index card in Rosa's own careful handwriting, the citation for the exact federal civil rights statute that covered what was happening to her in real time, and a single line underneath it that read, "I will be filing a complaint." She had written that card years ago. She had carried it ever since, not out of fear, out of certainty. Because Rosa Delgado had grown up watching her parents navigate a country that made them prove themselves at every turn, and she had made a quiet decision somewhere along the way that she was going to know the law well enough that when her moment came, and she always knew her moment would come, she would be ready for it. Cheryl Benton was 48 years old and had lived in Flower Mound for 9 years. She worked in residential real estate. She served on her HOA's Residence Advisory Committee. She thought of herself, without a trace of irony, as someone who looked out for her community. What she meant by that, as dispatch logs dating back to early 2024 would eventually make very clear, was that she had called the Flower Mound police on at least 7 minority delivery drivers over the previous 14 months. Not one of them had been found to have done anything wrong. Not one of those cases had resulted in any action whatsoever. Each one had been closed the same day it was opened, and Cheryl Benton had gone home each time without consequence. She also owned a doorbell camera. She used it often. Who she chose to film and who she chose to report would become its own story before this was over. Officers Dale Pruitt and Kevin Slade arrived 8 minutes after Cheryl's call. Pruitt was an 11-year veteran professional, measured, the kind of officer who read a situation before he spoke. Slade was younger and, at least initially, more inclined to defer to the person who had made the call. Cheryl met them at the edge of the lot and used the word illegal 3 times before they reached Rosa's car. Rosa stepped out slowly, hands visible, nothing rushed about any of it. She spoke in the same accented voice she had used her entire life, announced what she was doing, and opened the glove compartment. She placed the documents on the hood of her car one at a time: license, passport, naturalization certificate, and then the index card. Pruitt picked it up. He read it. He set it down carefully. Slade had stopped writing. From several feet behind them, Cheryl's voice arrived again. Those could all be fake. Pruitt turned around slowly. His voice, when he spoke, was entirely flat. He told her to step back. Rosa was already holding her phone. She pressed record. She stated the date and the time. She stated the location. She read both officers' badge numbers aloud. And then she stated Cheryl Benton's full name, which she had read off the vehicle registration sitting in plain view through Cheryl's own car window while Cheryl had been busy talking to the officers. Cheryl stared at her. Rosa did not smile. She did not need to. The officers left without incident. Pruitt's report, filed before end of shift, was notably thorough, every detail present, every timestamp accounted for. Cheryl stood in the parking lot for a moment longer, then walked to her car without another word. Rosa sat back in her Civic. She looked at the index card in her hand, the one she had written years ago, the one she had never hoped to use and always known she would. She opened her notes app. She began typing, time of first contact, names, badge numbers, exact words spoken, in the exact order they had been spoken, the make and color of Cheryl's car, the registration plate she had read through the windshield. She was not angry. She was building something. The following week, Rosa filed a formal civil rights complaint with the Flower Mound Police Department. She filed a second, separate report with the FBI Civil Rights Division field office in Dallas. She did both from her apartment, between a Tuesday evening class and a Wednesday morning delivery shift, because her life did not stop for any of this. She still had tuition to cover. The FBI complaint triggered a federal review flag almost immediately. Agent Sandra Kowalski was assigned to the case within days, and the reason it moved that quickly was that Rosa's complaint was not the first signal. When Kowalski ran Cheryl's address against the Flower Mound dispatch system, what came back was not an isolated incident. It was a list. 7 calls, 14 months, all from the same address, all involving minority delivery drivers, all closed without finding a single instance of wrongdoing. Agents pulled the full logs and began working through them methodically. Then they subpoenaed Cheryl's doorbell camera footage, the same camera she had raised at Rosa's window, and what it contained stopped the review team cold. In the 6 weeks before the incident with Rosa, that camera had captured 4 white delivery drivers in the same parking lot, same location, same general time frame. Cheryl had filmed all of them. She had called police on none of them. She had not been reacting. She had been selecting. The camera she had used to intimidate a 28-year-old law student eating into her lunch break became the first piece of evidence that took Cheryl Benton from a woman having a bad day to a woman with a documented, deliberate pattern. But it was what came next that changed the shape of the case entirely. Buried in the dispatch records, further back than the 14 months investigators had initially pulled, sitting in a late 2023 log entry that almost went unnoticed, was a single report. A black man, mid-30s, had been detained for 40 minutes in a Flower Mound parking lot after a caller matching Cheryl's address reported him as suspicious. He had been using a delivery app. He had been waiting on a pickup confirmation. He had been released without incident, no wrongdoing found, case closed same day. His name was David Carver. Rosa's legal team tracked him down. He agreed to speak. What David described in his testimony was not similar to what happened to Rosa. It was identical. The phone raised in his face, the accusations, the word illegal directed at an American-born man standing on American soil doing a job. The 2 officers, the 40 minutes of standing in a parking lot explaining his right to be there, while the woman who had called faced no questions at all, no scrutiny, no consequence. He had driven home that afternoon in late 2023 carrying something he could not name and could not put down the specific weight of having been treated like a suspect for existing. He had never found out who made that call. He had never received an explanation. He had simply been released and sent on his way, as though 40 minutes of his life and whatever it had cost him internally was not worth a follow-up. When Rosa's legal team called him, nearly 2 years had passed. He had never spoken about it publicly. When they told him his afternoon was now part of a federal case, and that the woman who had called the police on him had done it to at least 7 other people before doing it to an accredited law student who had been ready for her, he was quiet for a long time before he agreed to testify. His testimony did not just add weight to Rosa's case. It proved something that Cheryl's attorneys would spend the rest of the litigation trying to argue against, that this was not a reaction. It was a rehearsed pattern. Rosa had not been targeted because of anything she did. She had been targeted because of what she looked like, and she was simply the first person in that parking lot who knew exactly what to do about it. Investigators had connected 8 separate incidents to one address, 8 people, 8 calls, 0 wrongdoing ever found. David had carried that afternoon alone for almost 2 years without ever knowing who made that call or why. Agent Kowalski's expanded review did not stop at the dispatch logs. It pulled Cheryl's professional records, and what emerged there completed a picture that had been building piece by piece since the moment Rosa pressed record in that parking lot. Between 2023 and 2024, 3 separate minority buyers had filed complaints against a Flower Mound real estate agent who had steered them away from properties through a consistent combination of delayed responses, inflated assessments, and quiet suggestions that certain listings were no longer available by the time they inquired. All 3 complaints had been filed, none had been formally investigated. All 3 buyers had eventually purchased homes elsewhere. The agent named in all 3 complaints was Cheryl Benton. What had begun as a parking lot harassment was now a federal case with 3 separate threads, a documented harassment pattern, 8 targeted individuals across 2 years, and a professional record of steering minority buyers away from the community she had appointed herself to protect. Every thread led back to the same woman. And none of it had ever been connected until a 28-year-old law student with an accent and a handwritten index card decided she was done being the end of the line. Rosa's civil lawsuit was amended to include a Fair Housing Act violation. She filed the updated complaint from her library desk on a Thursday night, between a chapter on constitutional law and a cold cup of coffee, and then she went back to studying. Cheryl Benton arrived at her deposition composed. Her attorney, Dennis Farrell, had spent the previous week reassuring her public space, no physical contact, First Amendment protections, nothing here that couldn't be managed. He had handled cases like this before. He was not particularly concerned. He had not accounted for Rosa. Rosa sat across the table, without a courtroom title and without a bar card. She had her notes, she had her binder, she had her legal team seated beside her, and she had the same accented voice that Cheryl had sneered at in a Flower Mound parking lot 3 months earlier. She did not open with a statement. She opened with a date. She walked Cheryl through every dispatch log entry, one by one, every call, every driver, every outcome. No wrongdoing found. No wrongdoing found. No wrongdoing found. 8 times across 2 years, the same result, the same closed case, the same person at the other end of the phone. Then she placed David Carver's written testimony on the table and gave Cheryl time to read it. Then came the doorbell stills. 4 white delivery drivers, same parking lot, same 6-week window, all filmed, none reported. Rosa set them down in a row and then looked across the table and asked Cheryl, in a voice that did not waver and did not rise, to explain the difference between those 4 men and the 8 people she had called police on. Cheryl said she did not recall those incidents. Rosa placed another still on the table. Then another. She did not raise her voice once in 3 hours. She did not need to. Every question was precise. Every document was already in the record. Every answer Cheryl gave that contradicted the evidence was noted, dated, and filed without comment. Farrell objected in the first hour. He objected less in the second. By the 3rd hour, he had stopped objecting entirely and was writing a number on the bottom corner of his legal pad. He tore it off and slid it across the table to his client. Cheryl looked at the number. She looked at Rosa. She looked back at the number. For the first time since that parking lot, she had nothing to say. The civil judgment came down at $500,000. Harassment, racial discrimination, Fair Housing Act violation, all counts. Cheryl's real estate firm sent a termination notice within 72 hours. The language cited conduct incompatible with the firm's professional obligations and client standards. Her HOA convened an emergency session and voted to remove her from the Residents Advisory Committee she had chaired for 6 years. The full federal complaint history, all 8 incidents, all the closed cases, all the outcomes, was entered into public record. Within 30 days, Cheryl Benton was no longer a resident of Flower Mound. Agent Kowalski's review did not close with the verdict. 3 additional addresses in the Flower Mound area had surfaced during the investigation showing similar minority driver complaint patterns. The work that Rosa's parking lot moment had set in motion was larger than one case now. The 3 minority buyers whose complaints had been shelved without investigation received formal notification that their cases were being reopened under the expanded Fair Housing Act review. And David Carver, who had spent 40 minutes detained in a parking lot in late 2023, who had gone home that day carrying something heavy and unnamed, who had never received an explanation or an apology or even an acknowledgement that what happened to him was wrong, was contacted directly. Someone called him and told him what had happened, what had been found, and what it meant. It was the first time in nearly 2 years that anyone had. He was formally acknowledged in the case record. It was not everything, but it was something, and for a long time, he had had nothing. Outside the courthouse, a reporter asked Rosa what she wanted people to take from all of it. She paused, not because she didn't know the answer, because she wanted to say it correctly. She said she had her passport, she had her papers, she had spent years learning the law so that she would know exactly what to do when that moment came, and she was ready. The reporters were quiet when she finished. Cheryl Benton had spent 9 years deciding who belonged in Flower Mound. It took her one Saturday afternoon in 2025 to guarantee she would never live there again. Rosa Delgado had carried that index card for years, not out of fear, out of certainty. She always knew the day was coming. She was always going to be ready. Kindly share your thoughts, drop them in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. Thanks for watching.